Welcome back to the Campus Pressbox podcast. I am your stand-in host this afternoon. Seth Marenbloom. Damon Bowman is usually running the show over on this podcast. He had a prior engagement, so you're stuck with me today to go through episode number 57. I am also joined today by Damon Del Rosario and Evan Skilleter. I hope I pronounced your name correct, Evan. Did I?
It was perfect.
All right. Awesome. How are you doing today?
Yeah, good. Glad to be here. This is my first time on this particular podcast, so looking forward to it.
Welcome aboard. And Damon, this is not your first go-around with us. How are you today?
I'm doing real well. No, it's not. Usually I'm on the basketball side, but happy to talk some pigskin.
All right, so let's jump right into this. I'll start with you, Damon. What was the big game this weekend, in your opinion?
And the Notre Dame Texas one, at least for me, was one that I don't know why I kept hearing that that Texas was not going to compete and that it shouldn't be. I guess is on my radar, but it was one that I liked not only from a gambling standpoint, but also just from an entertainment standpoint. So that one I had circled early to make sure I caught.
So did you win some money on this one?
Well, luckily, I don't gamble the way that I once did, where I'm actually betting money every time. But I'm in a pick'em pool where you actually pick 7 games a weekend. So I do have to still consider the spread. I've got to pay attention to some of the variables there, but I don't lose or win every single time. It's cumulative over the course of the year. So I get a little taste, but at the same time, I don't lose my rent money.
All right. So did you pick Texas to cover? Did you pick them to win outright? What was your thinking on this one?
I picked them to cover. It was plus 3.5 in my case. So, like I said, that's I guess we're the wheelhouse. I thought they had a chance to win an outright, but I figured they'd keep it close and cover regardless.
All right, Evan, where did you see this one finishing out at before the game was played?
Well, with the game being at Texas, I did expect Notre Dame to win, but I was very interested to see how Charlie Strong came out. You know, they named 2 starting quarterbacks, and it was going to be quite an interesting game. So I'm glad it panned out the way it did as far as the competitiveness of the game. I really enjoyed what I saw from Texas. Notre Dame as well. That Kaiser is a heck of a quarterback, but I thought Notre Dame would win this game. I thought it'd be competitive being down in Texas. So I think it was everything that I expected.
All right. I'm speaking for myself. If both of these teams could have lost, I would have been happy. I'm not a Notre Dame fan. I'm not a Texas fan. Like I said, if both teams could lose their games, I would be perfectly happy for whatever reason. With that said, going back to the spring, basically April, myself and Damien and some other Campus Pressbox guys we're talking about this game over Slack, and since April, I've been on Texas. I thought Texas would win this game. Now that the game's played out, I look brilliant for this one game. I mean, I know that this isn't a wave that I can continue to ride for long, but this one, I picked not pretty accurately. I picked it accurately. I liked Texas in this one because I liked Strong. And Notre Dame, they just seemed like that they were really set up to disappoint this year, and they played well. Texas played well. It was one heck of a ball game, but Texas obviously came out on top. Damon, what do you think the difference was in how Brian Kelly handled his rotating quarterback situation compared to how Strong handled his rotating quarterback situation?
Well, and I think it was kind of the overriding theme, and I saw it, a lot of times I'm scrolling through Twitter. I know we interacted a little bit on Saturday while watching games, and I think the overriding theme was that he didn't stick with Kaiser soon enough and just go with him when it was pretty clear he was the obvious choice to make better decisions, to make bigger plays, and he, still flip-flopped, whereas I think Charlie just happened to use his guys in the right spots. He pushed all the right buttons. with his switching out of Buechele and then Swoops, and obviously at the end when he had Swoops take over and just start running over people, it was just all the right buttons and mixing the right recipe together between those two quarterbacks to early on to take shots down the field, and then late to use his running quarterback to finish off the game.
All right, Evan, do you think that Charlie Strong outcoached Brian Kelly in this game?
I do. I think Texas maybe overperformed in scoring as many points as they did. The way that he used his quarterback, I'm right there with Damon. It was just so impressive. He knew exactly what the strength of each quarterback was, and each time that quarterback was on the field, his strength was used to its maximum potential. And he put those quarterbacks in the right spots and put his team in a great spot to win the game. I was incredibly impressed with Charlie Strong and that whole offense.
All right, let's stay in the Big 12 and move on to Oklahoma, Houston. Evan, let's start with you on this one. What were your impressions of this game going into the game compared to how it ultimately wrapped up?
Well, I think a lot of people were giving Houston a shot, and I was as well. And I was just so impressed by Houston's offense. Tom Herman is obviously a great coach. He's had success everywhere he's been, from Ohio State over to Houston. He's run pretty much the same offense the whole time he's been coaching, and it was just an incredible sight to see. That Ward Jr., incredible passer, a bit inaccurate on the run, but they made huge plays, third down after third down, it seemed like. And they just outplayed Oklahoma. For a team like Oklahoma to have so much hype coming into the season and not live up to that hype during this game was sort of disappointing and also surprising. But overall, very impressed with Houston's offense.
Damon, do you think that Houston beating Oklahoma was a true upset, or is Houston truly one of the big boys who happens to play in a mid-major conference now that we've seen them, beat Florida State last year in their bowl game and then, turn around and open this year with a win against Oklahoma?
I have a feeling by the time we get late into this year, we're going to be looking at it as that it was not a true upset, that Houston ends up being a legit, whether it's contender for the playoffs or just, among the top 10 all season. We'll look back and say, okay, well, that wasn't a true upset. We just, at the time, all of us gave way too much credit to Oklahoma, kind of as usual, which I think is becoming, again, another overriding theme the last number of years, of that Oklahoma gets given all this credit early, and then we see some different performance from them, and that Houston, at least this year, is a team that's on the rise, and it was a legit just win. I thought they flat out outplayed them, just kind of like Evan said. I think the defense was really what impressed me the most, because the first drive of the game, Oklahoma just stomped them and right down the field and scored. And then Houston's defense, started just swarming, and it seemed like Baker Mayfield was running for his life on every time he went back for a pass. He had someone in his face and was running away or throwing it out of bounds. So credit to Houston for just really locking things down and just taking over.
Yeah, if I may, you bring up a good point in that Houston is likely to go through their schedule fairly easily. I look at the schedule, and the toughest game I see is the second to last week against Louisville, and it looks like it's at home. So by the end of the season, we could definitely be looking at a Houston team that hasn't lost a game and has two very quality wins against Louisville and Oklahoma, assuming that they win that Louisville game.
All right, so Evan, do you think that the narrative on Bob Stoops is fair when people say that he is unable to win the big game?
I have a short answer for that, and that's yes. I mean, we've seen it time and time again. This game was so hyped up. It was so exciting. It was, the first big game of that big Saturday, and I think all of the nation's attention was on that game. And, yeah, they blew it, and we do see that time and time again. And I think that's very disappointing for a lot of people, especially those Oklahoma fans.
I used to fall into that camp of saying that, Stoops couldn't handle the pressure, and I kind of tongue in cheek referred to him as not so big game Bob. My opinion's changed a little bit on that. I mean, you look at his resume. He's 179-47 in his time at Oklahoma. He has a national championship, to show for it. He has 9 Big 12 championships. He is only 8-9 in bowl games, but those conference championships and that one national championship, should count for quite a bit. Do you think, Evan, that part of the problem with Stoops is the fact that he has been in one place for 18 years now?
That's a good question. I think it'd be unfortunate if that was the problem, because we see fewer and fewer coaches staying in the same spot for long. 8-9 in bowl games, though, is a tough pill to swallow. That's just I can't see Oklahoma fans being okay with a 500 record going forward with bowl games.
All right, so Damon, let's kick this back to you and talk a little bit more about the Houston angle to this game. Do you think that this helps solidify their argument to get into the Big 12, or do you think that them beating one of the conference's existing powers is more detrimental to them?
I mean, I would hope that it would solidify their case. It really bugs me. I mean, I saw that really the suggestion right afterward that, hey, they may have just ruined their chances because no one's going to want them. But first of all, it makes sense even from a regional standpoint, which was one of those things just from a OCD standpoint for me. It's like, all these conferences that align with teams that have nothing to do with either their region or whatever it may be kind of drives me nuts. But also the fact that, regardless of the fact that they just beat one of your big boys, isn't that what you want? At least them to have the opportunity to step in there and actually be a legitimate contributor to the success of that conference, not you want to bring in some paper lion and then they get shredded year in and year out and they're at the bottom of your conference. Doesn't mean that they're going to beat Oklahoma every year, but to have Houston become a little bit more viable of a program. I've been actually hearing for years how great their facilities are, and I don't understand why Houston doesn't take a step up. Well, here's their chance, and if you put them in there and maybe give them that little bit of a boost, that gives the Big 12 another viable program that maybe even in both the major sports could eventually start to actually compete at a little bit higher level.
I do agree with you on all of that, Damon. Evan, one more question with Houston going into the Big 12. Do you think if they do become a member of the Big 12 that helps Houston keep Herman at Houston longer?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I actually saw in our Slack chat, I think I saw a little tidbit that he makes $5 million,
yes.
$5 million bonus if they move to the Big 12 or move to a bigger conference. So yeah, I think it definitely does. You have a coach that's an incredible coach that with all the success, he's going to look to be at a big program, and Houston needs to take that step in order to become that big program and keep Tom Herman.
All right, let's shift our focus to what many people consider to be the best conference in all of college football. Whether that's the case, I think is probably up for debate at this point. But let's move over to the SEC. Did either one of you or both of you watch that Alabama USC game?
I did not.
How about you, Damon?
No, I did not catch much of it. Once I saw the score, I especially didn't. I made sure I didn't flip over to it.
All right, this is a game that was on my radar to really sit down and watch all of. Very, very early on once it was scheduled. I mean, just the storyline of Lane Kiffin having been left at the airport by USC and then moving over to Alabama. I mean, just that storyline in and of itself was great. Evan, do you think that the drubbing that Alabama put on USC this weekend was because Kiffin had a chip on his shoulder, and Saban allowed him to basically make this the Kiffin Bowl?
Well, I definitely think there's a chip on his shoulder, and I definitely think he wanted to keep putting up points. So, yeah, I would have to agree. I think Alabama's definitely the better team, and I'm not surprised that it was so lopsided. But if I'm not mistaken, Alabama went for it on 4th and goal when they were up by
Yes.
20-some points.
Yes.
Which, I mean, come on, that should be evidence enough to know that they definitely wanted to put it to USC, and they definitely did so. And I think you're right, Kiffin is a big reason why.
All right, so Damon, like Notre Dame, Texas, and like another game that we'll get to in a few moments, Clemson, Auburn. Alabama is yet another team in the country who, going into this game, appeared to have a quarterback controversy, and Saban and Kiffin hadn't decided on the guy between Blake Barnett and Jalen Hurts. So both were played early on in this game. What we saw from Jalen Hurts, Damon, do you think that he has earned the right, even as a true freshman, to be the man in charge of this Kiffin and Saban offense?
It's one of those things that I hate getting hung up on. It drives me crazy when any program does it, when they get hung up on whether a guy's a freshman, a guy's a senior, whatever he is, or if he's bided this time. If the kid can play, the kid can play. If he shows poise, he shows poise. If he produces, he produces. Put him out there. Let him be your guy. Now, I know, like I said, Saban, the way he runs his program, I mean, and in college, there's not as much of that concern with a 2-quarterback system, or obviously whether it's a true 2-quarterback or just an occasional 2-quarterback. But yeah, I think, regardless of what his status is, year in college, whatever it may be, if the kid can produce and he can run your team and run a national championship level team, especially and run over a team like USC, I mean, let him be the guy at the reins.
Yeah. Evan, with the defense that Saban runs out on the field year in and year out, regardless if it was Kirby Smart in charge of it or Jeremy Pruitt or whoever, considering that defense and considering, even with some new starters on the offensive line, the quality of the offensive line, do you think, Evan, that it really matters who the quarterback is in that Saban offense?
No, as soon as you asked that question, that was my first thought, is that we've seen time and time again, it doesn't really matter who the quarterback is. That running game and that defense is so strong, or are so strong, that the quarterback just needs to run the show, throw a couple quick passes here and there. And we've seen some of their quarterbacks make big plays occasionally, but it's always been about that hard-nosed, old-fashioned style football. And I don't think the quarterback in their offense really matters.
No, I tend to agree with you on that. All right, let's move on to Clemson, Auburn. Now, it sounds like that this is a game that none of us actually sat down and watched. Is that accurate?
Correct.
Yeah, but I didn't sit down and watch it. I did have it on and kind of glanced at some of the things going on, but didn't, I guess, pick it apart with a fine-tooth comb or anything like that.
All right, so it didn't surprise me that it was a close game. I maybe in a bit of an SEC homer pick, I had picked Auburn to win a close game against Clemson. In reality, Clemson won a close game against Auburn. I think the storyline coming out of this, revolves around much the same topic that we've been talking about with these other games, and that is using multiple quarterbacks. Malzahn, not to be outdone by these other teams playing 2 quarterbacks, it sounds like he was kind of rolling with 3 at any given moment in time, whether it was rotating a couple in at quarterback or just putting all 3 on the field at the same time. Damon, has Malzahn become desperate through this inability to make a decision?
I don't know if it's desperation or, in a game like, again, against a team like Clemson that's so highly regarded that as a national championship contender, and the fact that, maybe he really, truly at this point doesn't know which one is the best, that may, in that kind of circumstance, serve you to really keep a team like Clemson off balance and be like, they don't know who they're going to play, and we're going to put anybody in there who seems like they're going to perform at any given moment. And in all honesty, in some cases, in a one-game scenario, can almost be a genius move, because Clemson's the kind of team that you kind of expect is going to put up some points, and they're going to be extremely difficult to beat no matter how good you play that day. And so it may have even served to just throw them off enough to keep that game close. I actually liked Auburn to keep it close and kicked myself because I didn't pick that as one of my covers. So I kind of expected what resulted in that really close game.
All right, so Evan, in looking at the box score for this game, Clemson had a total of 399 yards. Watson had 248 with a touchdown and an interception. He ran it for another 21 yards without a score. Do you think the hidden story in this game was the ability of the Auburn defense to contain Watson and to hold that high-octane Clemson offense to 19 points?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Auburn was very physical from all reports that I've heard, and I do think that they played very well against this Clemson offense. I also think it has a little bit to do with the Clemson coaches figuring out what was going to work. And, looking at the box score, you see Gallman with 123 rushing yards, and that's 4.1, or he rushed 4.1 yards per carry. So anytime you can be that successful on the ground, you're going to continue pounding it, and you saw that with 30 carries for Gallman. So I think it's a mixture of both. Auburn did a nice job slowing down Watson and containing him and the passing game, but Clemson also kind of slowed it down and went to the ground more so than we thought we would see.
Yeah, Damon, do you think the quality of play by Auburn's defense in this game, do you think that will bode well for them once conference play starts, and they may actually be in slightly better shape and win a few more games in conference than maybe the nation is thinking right now?
Yeah, I mean, Auburn's one of those that I always sort of expect that's kind of what they're going to be, and they've had I think kind of historically they've had their years where the offense was certainly not pretty to watch, but their defense always keeps them there. So yeah, I think they'll, especially with as much credit as people give the SEC. I mean, certainly Alabama is always what they are, but there's some, when we saw this weekend, there's some chinks in the armor when it comes to some of the other programs across that conference. So I think Auburn, as usual, will be right up there in the mix, and that defense will snag a couple games for them that perhaps we thought some of the other folks were going to step up and take this year from them.
All right, let's stay in the SEC with probably one last game, not unless either one of you guys want to tack on another game or two at the end of this conversation, and move on to LSU, Wisconsin. Damon, did LSU and Les Miles just shoot themselves in the foot by trying to put this game in Harris's hands?
Yeah, I mean, and we had kind of a little bit of this conversation, I know, via Twitter about the LSU quarterback situation, and it always baffles me. Like it flat out baffles me that year in and year out, LSU has this team that just is loaded with talent, and no matter what, I don't know why they can't recruit just a quarterback why can't they just get a 5-star passing quarterback that just kills it for that team so that they have no question? And it seems certainly that they, kind of in and out of that game, they would have moments where they just forget themselves. And even at the beginning, they let themselves get behind and then they decide to take it back. And then they just make boneheaded mistakes that lead to that loss. And then boneheaded mistakes where a guy absolutely annihilates a guy just celebrating at the end of the game. So, they're just a mystery to me why they can't ever settle that and just be that power across the board for one season. They just never seem to be able to do it.
All right, so Harris was a highly acclaimed quarterback coming out of high school. I don't know if he was a 5-star, but I'm pretty sure that he was no worse than a 4-star recruit. And you look at his offer list, at least according to Rivals, he had offers from a lot of the power programs in the country. So on paper, Les Miles and Cam Cameron, the offensive coordinator, they got a good quarterback. They got a kid with potential to come to Baton Rouge and play quarterback for LSU. So so Evan, based on that, do you think the problem is really an inability to get a quality athlete to come in and play quarterback at LSU, or does the problem have more to do with Miles and Cam Cameron's inability to develop a kid at the position?
Yeah, it's probably a little of both. Brandon Harris was, according to ESPN 300, was a 4-star recruit. Who's the last good quarterback we've seen out of LSU? Would we go back to Jamarcus Russell?
Oh,
or is it
I would almost
maybe.
I'd almost go to Matt Flynn and say he was the guy, only because he was the guy who actually he made. I don't know. He was settled. He made plays. He actually made plays with his arm, it seems like, a lot more. And I think that's one of the things. And again, I know that's me just kind of criticizing Les Miles' style. It's kind of across college football where coaches have that style, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I know you're going to win because you coach a certain way and you make that your culture. But the teams that don't want to put a passing quarterback on their roster and say, this is our guy, no matter what, and we're going to play only this way. That's what LSU feels like to me. Like, they always want that guy who is sort of on the run, make decisions sort of haphazardly, and that's why they have these upset losses, or they don't necessarily reach expectations. There's no change in that system ever, not even a small change to say, hey, let's put a guy back here who's going to just run the offense and is going to be in command from a passing standpoint. And maybe that would change their fortunes, but like I said, they still get guys who have big numbers or big stars next to their name, but they don't necessarily pan out.
All right. My opinion on this subject has waffled a bit over the last few months. It's changed a bit over the past few months. Towards the end of last year, when Oliva, I think is how you pronounce the AD's name, it seemed like he was trying to drum up support to get Miles fired before the year even ended. I thought he was crazy. It's like here's an AD who has a head football coach who's won 77% of his games, has a handful of conference championships, has a national championship, and he wants to run him out of town. I'm thinking, who else is he going to get, aside from bringing Nick Saban back, which is not going to happen? Who else is he going to get to come in and win 77% of their games and get a national championship at LSU? I thought he was crazy. But now I'm becoming convinced that Miles and Cam Cameron, who Cameron being there is completely on Miles because he's the head coach. He selects, he hires his assistant coaches. That offensively, he's a bit confused. I've seen criticism on Twitter that he runs a pro style offense in a day and age where you have to run a spread. I don't think that's necessarily the reason that LSU's offense is struggling. Because I think with a back like Fournette, you can run play action because, as we saw against Wisconsin, when he was feeding Fournette the ball, Fournette was rolling and he was running around people and over people, and it was running violently and was showing speed. He was doing it. But then come crunch time, he puts it on Harris's shoulders. He isn't really going play action, and he throws the pick. So I'll throw this back to you, Evan, after I just went off on my little rant. Do you think, based on all of this, that it is time for LSU and Les Miles to part ways?
Yeah, if they can't get back to a top 10 finish, then it absolutely is time for Les Miles to go. And he is on the hot seat. You talk to any LSU fan, they want someone that's going to bring the program back to the promised land. And Les Miles has kind of worn out his welcome. And you said it yourself, the athletic director and the athletics program almost made it seem like they were ready for Les Miles to go, even though their words might have contradicted that a little bit toward the end of the season. I do think that Les Miles is on the hot seat, and I think soon enough, this year, maybe next year, he'll be on his way out.
Because now as we're having this conversation, I'm doing a Google search. I'm pulling a Damien. They're former players now, at least one in Marcus Spears, who are speaking out and saying Miles needs to be fired. So now you have the athletic department trying to get him out, and probably some boosters trying to get him out towards the end of last year. Now you have fans across the country of theirs trying to run him out of town. Now you have former players who played in the NFL who, their voice carries weight, who are publicly saying the man needs to go. I'm going to tie this back to my comments on Bob Stoops at Oklahoma, Damon, and I'll ask you this: Is this another case of Miles and a head coach being in one place too long?
I don't know if it's necessarily just the coach being there too long, and I think these two coaches it's interesting to me, and I'll kind of circle around to it, but I think Miles, they've had off-field issues there that they've kind of let him slide on. They've had disappointments when he's had tons of talent. So I think his is an ability to kind of say, okay, we let him off the hook a few times, and now from the performance standpoint, now the performance isn't superseding those things. And he's been there a long time, so it makes a little bit of sense. It's not only is it maybe stale because of the length of time, but there's those other things, and he's kind of worn out his welcome. Whereas I think on the Stoop side of it, he's been there a long time. He's the kind of guy to me who I think would maybe rekindle some of his magic if he looks back at some of his old teams. Like, he won the national championship early on in his career. Maybe if he just looks at kind of the recipe for how he did those things, he could rekindle it, and in Oklahoma, they'd get back to, winning those big games and winning national championships. Whereas LSU, I think it's kind of run its course, and they maybe need to get rid of that staleness and find somebody else. And they're high enough profile. Yes, while it is a valid question, say who are they going to get, and is it worth it for all those wins? Are they going to be able to replace that? LSU will find somebody that can come in and actually run that program and probably rekindle the fact that they're a national championship contender and get them back in national title contention.
All right, Evan, let's piggyback off of Damon's comments. Give me one name who LSU should make their big play for, if they do in fact fire Miles, which at this point I'll be surprised if they don't.
Tom Herman.
Why?
Well, especially if Houston doesn't go to the Big 12 this year, if Tom Herman's as successful as we think he's going to be, that's a guy that might look to be on the move. It's a totally different look for LSU, but that Brandon Harris kind of has those tools to possibly run that Tom Herman offense.
All right, same question to you, Damon. Who's the one guy that you think LSU should make their big push for?
Well, I'm not huge in the coaching circle, probably names like you guys are, but I would agree with Evan and say Tom Herman, because I think that would be the kind of move, especially if Houston does what I think they may do this year with just performance. He's going to be such a hot commodity. He's going to be that name that recruits are seeing. They're going to be seeing his style right in front of their face. And then he's going to be at a higher profile program, especially if Houston, again, either doesn't get selected or doesn't make the move to the Big 12. And it's the SEC. So, again, he may just sort of have that right place, right time. Name is out in front of everybody. Perfect storm of getting all those pieces back in place for LSU at exactly the right time to give them that refreshed look. So that would be the guy I would want to put in place.
All right. I think that LSU is still so hung up on what Saban did there and what Saban is currently doing within their own conference at Alabama that they are going to run after, they're going to borderline stalk any coach that has that Saban pedigree. And that's why I think that the move that they should make, and I would expect them to make, is to go after Dabo Swinney from Clemson. I know it's crazy. Why would Swinney leave a place like Clemson, where he's had tons of success, just short of winning it all last year? But I think that's the type of profile that is of a coach that is going to make these LSU fans happy. Whether or not Swinney would be willing to make the move, I think it depends on how much money LSU is willing to shell out and what kind of pitch they have. Having said that, I think that they would also be setting themselves up for huge disappointment in 5, 6, 7 years when Saban retires and they lose, another coach to Alabama. Granted, Saban took a detour through the NFL, but if I were LSU, that would be a sacrifice that I would be willing to make if I truly believed that Swinney was the person to bring championships to LSU. Do either one of you think I'm completely crazy and off my rocker on that?
Not completely crazy. I think the ACC is definitely not the type of conference that the SEC is. So I could see Dabo looking at possibly a bigger conference and a bigger test.
Yeah, I agree. I agree completely with that, and I think that was the same direction I was going. Is that the ACC, while it's a successful program, it's a Power 5. It doesn't have the pedigree. It doesn't have the reputation that the SEC has. So I could see Swinney going over there and seeing that as the opportunity to sort of get that benefit of being in the SEC, the chance, the one conference in some cases has a chance to get 2 teams in the playoff, and the fact that, even Clemson, as great as their success has been recently, they've had plenty of years where they've been that program that has been expected to be a contender and has lost that early season game and is disappointed. So they're not necessarily the same type of program that just draws year in and year out the 5-star guy over and over to where they can sustain that success. So I could see him making that move.
All right. Are there any other games you guys want to talk about on this?
Not a game, but I do have a question, and
Yeah.
I hope you can answer it fast. I know this has been a talking point. Thursday we saw Tennessee struggle against Appalachian State. I am just curious how many games you think they will win this season.
Damon, let's start with you on that.
Oh gosh, Tennessee strikes me as one of those 8-4, maybe like a 9-3. I'm not tying that only to the Appalachian State sort of near miss. It's more, I think they're still a little bit of ways away from having the same type of talent that they once did back in the 90s when they were always such a power, and just with what the rest of the SEC is doing. I just don't see them being, where that double-digit team win, but we'll see.
All right, Evan, you've hit that topic that I'm passionate about. You've probably been around the website long enough now to know that this is one of my soapboxes. So I'll try to keep it short. I'll try to contain myself. When I say I think at best they're a 9-win team, and I think they're a 9-win team because they play in the SEC East, and there really isn't a team in that conference who right now, today, I can say is a true championship contender. Based on what I saw against Appalachian State, I think Tennessee has their work cut out for them against Virginia Tech, partially because Virginia Tech, they always field a solid team. Maybe not a great team year in and year out, but they field a solid team. And with Justin Fuente being the first-year coach there, I think that they're probably a bit more offensively oriented than they ever were under Frank Beamer. and Fuente, he knows how to beat an SEC team. He did it last year when he led his Memphis Tigers to a win over Ole Miss. Now, granted, Ole Miss and Tennessee are not the same team. 2015 is not 2016, but this is not a stage that Fuente, as the head coach, is going to be intimidated by. It's being played at a NASCAR track, so the whole thing is going to be just ridiculously crazy. I think so. That this is a game that I think Jones and Tennessee and Dobbs, should probably fear a little bit more than maybe they really should have, based on the results of that App State game. Yeah, they won, but they look like garbage, I thought. So I'd put them at 9 wins. It wouldn't shock me if maybe they stubbed their toe next week and it's only 8 wins, but I'd put them at 9. All right. With that, Evan, tell all of the listeners where they can find you online, like Twitter, website, email, and anything you want to throw out there.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at my last name, SKILLITER. I'm working on my website. I kind of got out of writing and podcasting a little bit, and since I'm back into it, I'm working on rebuilding that website. Then you can email me at, I guess we have a Campus Pressbox email now. What is that? Can you help me out with that?
I'm not sure what your email address is. It's probably evan.skilleter@campuspressbox.com, if I had to guess.
Sure. Well, until further notice, get me at evanskilleter@gmail.com, right, and we'll go from there.
All right. Damon, do you know where you can be found?
I do. Yes, and it should be, Evan, your first name dot last name. So I'm Damon.delrosario@campuspressbox.com. And for Twitter, you can find me at Damo, DAMO, Knows, KNOWS Sports. A lot of people mix in and they throw the N on the end of my first name for my Twitter. So Damo is the actual first part of that.
All right. And I'm Seth Marenbloom, sitting in for Damian Bowman. You can find me on Twitter at Seth Marenbloom. You can find all of my writing over at Campus Pressbox. And if you want to email me your comments, you may do so at seth.marenbloom@campuspressbox.com. A special thanks to Damon again for letting me host this for him today. And thank you, Damon and Evan, for joining us today.
Happy to do it. It was good talking to you guys.